And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call, as today the Indiana Hoosiers play their best game of the season in defeating the visiting Ohio State Buckeyes 85-60. It's a game that Indiana led from the tip, opening on a 10-0 run, and they never really let up through the entire first half, leading by 30 at halftime and then cruising in the second half to the 85-60 victory. And we are going to break it all down for you on today's very special edition of the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. I am your host, Jared Morris. I will be joined by Ryan Phillips and Will DeWitt. Andy Bottoms, unfortunately, can't be here, which is especially unfortunate given Robert Johnson's great performance. But subbing in for Andy today will be a name that many of you know, Mark Titus, who covered college basketball for Grantland. You probably follow him on Twitter at Club Trillion. He will be here stepping in for Andy and breaking down this IU-Ohio State game. I had a lot of people tweet me that they couldn't wait to listen to this one. That'll be the most fun and exciting episode of the Assembly Call today, and I don't dispute that at all. So let's begin, as we always do, go around the horn. I will start it with the banner moment. And, you know, in a game like this where Indiana plays so well and you win like this, there are a lot of different options for a banner moment. And for me, I'm going to go to a moment back in the first half, and it came with 1 minute and 21 seconds to play, and it was a turnover by Yogi Ferrell. And the reason why that is the banner moment is because that was the first turnover of the game between Yogi Ferrell, Troy Williams, and Robert Johnson. And those three guys have really been struggling with turnovers in Big Ten play. We all know it, and we know that that has really hampered Indiana's offense. But we saw in that first half what can happen when Indiana's three primary ball handlers don't turn it over. And that was the only turnover of the first half between all three of them. And it didn't come until 18 and a half minutes had already passed. And by that point, the game was pretty much over. Jared Sullinger had already tweeted out, just quit. These, let's just pack up and go home. These guys have quit. The Hoosiers had built their 20-some point lead. And hopefully it's something that the guys pay attention to, that they learn from. Because we know the offense, is going to struggle a little bit with James Blackman Jr. out. But, man, in that first half, the Hoosiers were functioning well, moving the ball, and when they don't turn it over and give their talented offensive players a chance to score, they do, and that's what we saw. So that was a huge sign of progress for Indiana and really was, to me, one of the biggest keys to that first half blitzkrieg that the Hoosiers put on. All right, let's go around the horn, fellas, get some opening statements. Ryan, I know you have nothing to rant about from that game, except maybe Nick Zeisloff shooting, but other than that, what's your opening thought on today's IU victory?
It has to be Thomas Bryant. I think 18 points, 13 rebounds, and he was just so involved on both ends of the floor, playing so hard and with his trademark, getting the crowd involved and everything. So I thought that he had his best performance as an IU player. I think that, he just impacted the game the way that we've been expecting him to impact the game. Even when he wasn't scoring, he was doing other stuff, altering shots, getting in there with hustle plays, things like that. And so this is the guy that we expected. And I think when you combine that with Robert Johnson getting off the schneid and, finishing with 11 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, and really playing as we expect him to as well, where he's just kind of playing and not overthinking it and just doing what he does and not putting too much pressure on himself to fill the role that James Blackman Jr. has left on the team. When these guys all kind of combine, they can fill that hole offensively. It doesn't have to be one guy stepping up into the hole. And so I thought that those two guys, Johnson and Bryant, really were the story today. I know Troy Williams had a great game, but I think those two guys playing really well, really solidly on both ends of the floor was really the difference for Indiana, especially early to build that big lead. I think they were both involved, again, on both ends and really driving the momentum and keeping things going early on especially.
Yeah. Will, your stat of the game.
All right, well, for the stat of the game, throughout the whole season, I've been focusing on offenses. That's the only thing to talk about. Today, I want to talk about a little bit of defense. Ohio State came into the game ranked 9th in the country in steal percentage on offense, as they only turned the ball over via a steal only 6.3% of the time. Well, in the first half today, the Hoosiers stole the ball on 23.7% of the Buckeyes' possessions, and they still finished the game with 13%, which, that's an impressive number. That's still double the Buckeyes' average.
Yep. Good stat there, Will. All right, let's go over to our special guest today, Mark Titus. And first, Mark, just want to thank you for being here. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us on today's episode.
I'm so excited to be here. This is the game that I totally wanted to be here for, to watch my alma mater get blown out by Indiana. That was just so much fun. My big takeaway, let's stay positive here for the Buckeyes. We won the second half. Like, is this a best of three with the half situation? Like, IU won the first half, we won the second half. Can we get one more half of play here and see who really gets the win? For me, so for a little background, I grew up an IU fan. I grew up in Indiana. I watched a ton of IU basketball all year. The takeaway for me was obviously Indiana's defense. From the Ohio State standpoint, Ohio State clearly didn't want to be here. This was their third true road game. Their first one was at UConn. They got completely smoked. Second one was in a high school gym at Northwestern, so the atmosphere is not really that big of a deal. Then obviously the Assembly Hall atmosphere was their third road game. It's pretty clear that this young team isn't really ready for that sort of atmosphere. And by the way, great timing that the students are back. This is like their first game back. We couldn't get the IU game like last week when there's no students there, and maybe Assembly Hall is, and it's crazy. So it was pretty clear that Ohio State just kind of quit, but part of that was that it's the young team, the atmosphere. If they look like they didn't want to be there, but the other part was IU finally deciding to play defense. I mean, they have for the last couple of games, but that has been the big problem all year, and it looks like they're finally starting to play consistently well defensively, so that's cool.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and we'll talk about that as we go forward because Indiana played better defense against Wisconsin, and they certainly played better defense today, and it almost seems like this team is forging a bit of a different identity, now 4-0 in Big Ten play, and we will talk about that as we move forward on this episode of the Assembly Call. A quick reminder to everybody, make sure that you get on our email list. We're up over 1,450 crazy IU fans just like you who get all of our emails, many of which is subscriber-only content that we only send out via email, including our post-game analysis email. So you want to make sure that you get on the list today so that you get tomorrow morning's jubilant post-game email. And you can do that one of two ways. You can go to assemblycall.com/subscribe, enter your email address, and you'll be on the list. Or you can text Indiana to 44144. You'll get a reply, then just text your email address, and you will be all signed up and ready to go on the email list. So we hope that you will join us. All right, everybody, I am Jared Morris. This is the Assembly Call, and we are breaking down Indiana's 85-60 victory over the Ohio State Buckeyes today. A huge first half by the Hoosiers. And let's talk a little bit about the defense. And Ryan, I want to go over to you first because you look at the numbers. Indiana holds Ohio State to 0.87 points per possession. And, when you looked at Indiana's KenPom ratings coming into today, there was a double-digit number next to Indiana's adjusted defensive efficiency ratio. I think it was 87th coming into the game, which, we haven't seen it that low in a long time. And, we've talked about the impact of James Blackman Jr. being out and that, for everything that it was going to hurt on the offensive end, would it allow this team to play better defense? And certainly it looked like it did today. What did you see from Indiana defensively in the first half? Because, holding Ohio State to only 18 points, part of that was that Ohio State missed, some decent looks at the basket. As Mark said, part of it was Ohio State just looking like it didn't want to be there. But I saw a lot of energy. I saw a lot of want to, and just active hands and active feet from the Hoosiers, which we haven't always seen. Certainly, in the past, but we're starting to see it more these last couple of games.
Well, I think defense is a lot of defense, at least for me when I played, was everybody else buying in as well. You all sort of feed off each other, and when things are going well, you sort of get amped up and you're more focused. And I think that a guy like James Blackman Jr., who, I don't want to speak ill of him now that he's out, but, he's just not a high-energy guy. He's not a guy who is as engaged defensively. We know that. As far as his defensive ability, I've seen Euro guys in draft videos play against chairs that play better defense. So, it's the kind of thing where you really lose something with him on the floor defensively. And I think that everybody today just bought in. The energy was there. The effort was there. And then when you throw in a guy like OG Anunoby coming off the bench, and he's been playing great defense all year, you're getting him more time with Blackman out, so you're seeing, him be more aggressive defensively. And even when he's not making a play, he's in the right position, he's deflecting balls, he's around the ball, doing the right things and not getting blown by. So I think that it's just everybody buying in and everybody focusing on defense. And it's just, as a team, that makes you better when everybody is buying in on both ends of the floor. We know they all buy in offensively, but now you just see more of a concerted effort to stop teams, and that hasn't been there all year. I mean, this is the same team that, got smacked around by UNLV and St. John's for part of that game. So, I mean, you're finally seeing these guys really start to play good defense. And, I mean, I think it's just attitude, and I think it's effort, and I think it's focus.
Yeah, Mark, what did you see from Indiana today defensively? I mean, obviously you mentioned that the defense was better. Was there anything specific from a scheme perspective they were doing, or was this just 5 guys who decided we're going to play a little bit better defense, which to me is a lot of what we've seen the last few games?
Right, I think it's more of the latter. I think to what Ryan was kind of talking about, for me, watching IU all year, it's almost like they, at the beginning of the year, thought, we can't score on defense, so why are we playing defense? What's the purpose here? Like, I don't get any more points in my box score for getting stops, so what's the purpose? And I don't know if it's because Blackman's out, because they just kind of reached a point where they realized if they're not going to guard, they're not going to make the tournament probably, or what happened that made them finally realize, hey, this is kind of cool. This is kind of a cool way to come together as a team. Because for me, after the Maui, after the Duke loss, it looked like these guys hated each other. It looked like IU just didn't really like each other. I mean, there's the Thomas Bryant thing in Maui where he was getting in Yogi's face, and I was kind of wondering if Yogi was he's a senior point guard who was starting on the #1 team in the country as a freshman. Why is he not grabbing guys by the jersey? Did these guys just not even want to be here right now? And today it looked like a completely different team versus a month ago. It looked like they did want to all play together. And the weird thing is, I think that defensive kind of cohesion bleeds over to offense. I get the feeling watching them on offense, they're playing more as a team. There's not the zero pass in transition pull up threes that they were shooting a lot in the first half of the season. There's not that kind of stuff. So I think just in general, they're playing more as a team. They're playing more together, and it's certainly helping the defense. And it certainly helps to have a guy like Blackman who maybe doesn't care so much on defense, not out there playing 30 minutes a game or whatever. So I don't think it's anything schematic. I just feel like it's 5 guys buying in and realizing there's a whole another half of the game that you have to play other than scoring. So.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us expected the defense to be better when Blackman went out. I mean, again, before the injury, Andy did a great analysis of all the different lineups that have played, and especially when James and Troy were in the game together, Indiana very rarely was successful because the defense was just so bad. And so we expected that uptick. But, Mark, I want to ask you, in terms of the impact of James being out, we saw against Wisconsin the offense really stagnate and really struggle. And today it looked like the ball was moving better, and what we saw in the first half, a lot of times when Indiana, will blitz an opponent in Assembly Hall, a lot of it will be because of three-point shooting. But Indiana was only 5 of 15 from downtown in the first half. It wasn't just getting hot from the arc. I think they had 12 assists on 18 made field goals, something like that. What did you see differently from Indiana offensively? Because this Ohio State team is they're a top 50 defense. They're a good defensive team, but Indiana was able to get it going even without Blackman out there.
Right. I mean, to be fair, Ohio State wasn't playing top whatever you just said defense. They clearly were just kind of waving at the ball, and they looked like IU against Duke defensively. But again, it was more just playing as a team. It was moving the ball, finding the open guy, not settling for just I'm kind of open. I'm going to shoot it now. There wasn't really anything in particular that stood out to me other than just I never got the feeling that one guy was dominating the ball. And there's a lot of times when I watch IU, it feels like Yogi's kind of forcing the action, and he's earned the right. He's a great shooter, great scorer. I had coaches say, Coach Mata told me one time in practice, I would rather Evan Turner shoot with 2 hands in his face than you shoot wide open sometimes. So sometimes it's like that with Yogi. It's like, yeah, a contested shot from him is probably better than a wide open shot from other guys. I'm okay with that. But today, I never really felt like one guy was taking all the shots. I never felt like they were trying to funnel the ball one direction or another. They're just out there running around, sharing the ball. The assist thing was crazy to me. I looked that up at halftime because I was more interested in Ohio State's assists. I felt like we had no assists. So I was curious to see what the assist discrepancy was, and I was shocked at not really shocked, but, I mean, the IU had so many assists at halftime. That's not really what I've become accustomed to with their offense. It's more, just transition, pull up from 3, maybe a guy kicks it out and transition to another guy. But I haven't seen the ball move like that in a long time, so that was pretty cool.
And Will, what were the assist numbers, just so we can put some numbers with this observation?
Yeah, we had 19 assists on 31 field goals. That's good for 61.3%. And we had a 1.6 assist to turnover ratio, which we only had a 2.4 in the first half, which is pretty good. So even though that number dropped a little bit, I'm still pretty happy about that. And then we only had turnovers on 17.3% of the possessions, which I thought was pretty good as well.
Yeah, and I want to start talking about some individuals. Before we do that, there were a couple numbers that I thought were interesting when you looked at this game beforehand. There was a definite strength versus strength here, where Indiana entered second in the country in effective field goal percentage, and Ohio State entered 11th in the country in defensive effective field goal percentage. And I thought, whoever did a better job there was really going to have a leg up in this game. And Indiana ends up shooting 54.5% in terms of effective field goal percentage, which is not quite at their 61.8 clip they entered with, but still pretty good. And the other thing to look at is, when Ohio State beat Kentucky and Northwestern, the two big wins they've had recently, they did two things. They kept their turnovers down, and they blocked shots. Ohio State entered turning it over on more than 20% of their possessions, but in both of those games, they turned it over under 16% of the time. Today, I think they finished at around 20, but in the first half, their turnover percentage was over 30. So it's a huge reason why Indiana went on that run. And Will, you mentioned the steal percentage. The Hoosiers entered today 40th in the country in steal percentage, which I'm not sure a lot of people know. But the other thing is the block percentage. Ohio State against Kentucky, their block percentage was 16%. Against Northwestern, it was 14.3%. And they entered the game in the top 10. And we've seen this Indiana team going back to last year, against Purdue, against other teams that have good interior defense, really struggle with that. And Indiana's 193rd in the country in block percentage. Well, today, Ohio State only blocked 4 shots all game, which is 5.8%. And in the first half, they only blocked 1. And yet Indiana was still able to get a lot of points in the paint. So being able to do that and not get blocked were huge, because that's what Ohio State has done in their big wins. Indiana didn't allow them to do it today, and it's a big reason why they were able to win. And Ryan, you talk about the rebounding too. That was also a big key for Indiana.
Yeah, I mean, Indiana out-rebounded Ohio State 51-31, and offensive, they had 18 offensive boards to Ohio State's 7. You just saw several times where guys would miss shots and there'd just be somebody cleaning it up. And again, as Mark was saying, it just looked at times. I mean, we all know rebounding is about positioning and effort. And Mark what he said was right. Ohio State at times just looked like they were kind of looking to the other guy, like, hey, why didn't you block him out? Well, was I supposed to? Like they weren't focused. I mean, you're at your best when you're just like, find a guy, get him out of there, and make sure he doesn't get the rebound. And it just seemed like everybody else was expecting the other guy to do something about it. And Thomas Bryant, I mean, we saw one where Bryant missed and Yogi was right there to tip it in. And, I mean, when the smallest guy on the floor is getting a rebound tip in at the goal, a left-handed rebound tip in at the goal, there's a problem. So, yeah, I think that part of it was Indiana really crashing the glass, but you also have to look at Ohio State was out of sorts today. I don't know what it was, but it just seemed like Indiana took advantage of an opponent that was off and just buried them, and that made it almost snowballed on Ohio State. It went from this isn't great to this is bad, this is really bad, this is awful, and Indiana just kept pounding them, and I thought that was a good job to see IU, but also take advantage of an opponent that's really struggling.
Yeah, no, Ohio State was out of sorts, and Bill Raftery was asked in the second half, do you attribute this to Indiana more or to Ohio State just being out of sorts? And he said, I'll shade it towards Indiana, giving Indiana a little bit more credit. Ryan, let me ask you, the two guys that we talked about coming into this game that had been in slumps, hadn't played well in Big Ten play, and needed to get going, especially with James Blackman out, were Troy Williams and Robert Johnson. Troy was outstanding in the first half. I think he had 16 of his 23 points in the first half, 6 rebounds, and he did it right from the get-go. Before the first TV timeout, Troy had 5 points, a rebound. He'd taken a charge, hadn't turned it over. Really, I thought, set the tone. And then in the second half, when Indiana came out a little bit sluggish and Ohio State started to put a little run together, they had a 10, 12-point run there early in the second half. I thought Robert Johnson really shut the door on it. He made a couple of threes, had a couple of great post feeds to Thomas Bryant, and Johnson finished with 11 points, 6 assists, 6 boards, clearly one of his best all-around games of the season and only 1 turnover. How important was it for those two guys to get going today? Because they were both terrific.
Well, the key stat for Troy Williams was 1 turnover. I mean, we all know what he can do, but he also turns the ball over in bunches, and I think that can throw off any momentum he's building within his game. So 23 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists. He was outstanding today, and he didn't turn the ball over. And he was engaged defensively, and we've seen that. He's still going to make the Troy Williams defensive plays where he runs out after a steal and leaves his guy a wide open lane to the hoop. I mean, that's just who he is at this point. But I thought that was key. And again, as I mentioned earlier, Robert Johnson I thought had a phenomenal game. Really nice bounce back. Didn't look like he was overthinking. Just went out and played. Didn't look like he was pressured at all. 11 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists. I just thought that both guys did what they do best and they valued the ball. They did not give the ball up. I mean, look, we all know Indiana loves offense. You cannot score if you don't have the ball and if you're giving the ball up. I think that should be the carrot on the stick for the guys is don't turn the ball over because you won't get points. And, clearly they're concerned with points. So, I think that just both guys played well. I think that they both just came in focused from the get-go and did what they can do and didn't try and do anything crazy.
Mark, what are your thoughts on Troy Williams? I mean, he's a guy that seems to oscillate between good Troy and bad Troy, sometimes on the same possession. And you see in a game like today how good he can be, how important he can be to this team. What are your thoughts on him, and how important is it that he start to play more consistent?
So I think coming into the year, the hope was that he would be Oladipo, kind of 2.0. I heard a lot of Indiana fans, my brother, my dad included, kind of making those comparisons that he could be Victor again. Like we could see a rise in him, and I will say it reminds me of Oladipo, but it's more of the Oladipo. If you think back to his career, I think the year before Oladipo left, he had a great year, but he had the moments like Troy does where he doesn't really know how to harness his. He knows he has length, he knows he has a ton of athleticism, he knows he can score, but he can't really harness it. He doesn't calm down. It's just balls to the wall, 100 miles an hour at all times, sort of stuff, and just inconsistent. And Troy's reminded me this year of Oladipo's. I think it was a sophomore because he left as a junior. And then that next year, Oladipo comes back. He kind of harnesses it. He's like, wait a second, I don't need to try to dunk on everybody every time I go to the rim. Sometimes I can pull up and hit a jumper. Sometimes I don't have to jump in the passing lane every single time I see a pass. So for me, I think with Troy, like today, he was that way. When he can kind of step back and say, I don't need to overwhelm everybody at all times. I can just feel the game out, kind of pick my spots where I want to attack. Because he still had moments where he's attacking some reverse layups, some blow by his guys, stuff like that, where he was still like, whoa, no one else on this team can make these plays. This was pretty wild. But he doesn't when he doesn't try to do that every time, he has success. So I mean, I'm like you guys. I just want him to be more consistent like that. I want him to be more of a basketball player and less of an athlete. And when he is, he's probably the best player on the team.
That's an interesting point, because I think obviously the kind of nominal best player on the team and the leader of the team is Yogi Ferrell. And I thought Yogi had another really good game, 16 points, 6 assists, 5 boards, a couple of them are offensive. And I swear he just hovered in the air for 5 seconds on one attempt for a rebound. A couple of 3 steals also. Did have the 3 turnovers. 2 of them came in the second half. They were a little bit sloppy. I think Yogi has really played better in Big Ten play, and he's picking his spots smartly, I think, to step up, to score, to really take charge. Mark, what are your thoughts on Yogi now as a senior? Like you mentioned, I mean, he's the starting point guard on the number 1 ranked team in the country as a freshman. Kind of has that lost year. The team was kind of a lost season in 2014, and then kind of reemerges last year. And now this year, his senior season, how do you assess how he's playing based on what your expectations are for him?
So at the start of the season, I had my argument all lined up that Yogi Ferrell is the most important player in the Tom Crean era of Indiana basketball, which is kind of crazy to say because you think Zeller, you think Oladipo, even if you want to go like the local kind of golden boy, you might say Holes. There are a lot of different guys that were probably a better argument than him. But I had it all lined up that this was the year for Yogi. It's all going to come together. He's a senior point guard, 4-year starter. And at the start of the year, it was like, what am I going to do with this argument? I'm an idiot. Why was I ever thinking that? And now I feel like it's starting to come back around. I feel like there is that hope that Yogi could he's being a better leader. He's obviously not the guy that is going to grab the guys by the shirts and kind of, I know this is a name that you guys don't want to hear, but the Aaron Kraft, the the obvious like vocal pointing guys out there sort of leader. But I think he is given. I think the way he plays dictates how kind of the other guys play. I think for so long in his career, he has these moments where he's forcing shots. He doesn't really look interested on defense. He's just kind of out there trying to get his. And now he's kind of shifted into that mode where he's fine not shooting every time down the floor. I mean, he shot only 12 times today, which if this game happens 2 years ago, Yogi's shooting 25 times. He's like, we're up by 30. I'm the point guard. I got the ball in my hand. I'm gunning. I'm getting mine. And he only shot 12 times today. Stuff like that might not seem like much, but to me that kind of shows that he's willing to distribute stuff. I'm not ready to go back to where I was and say he's more important than like Zeller and Oladipo, but he's definitely on that track, and I think he's going to be when he graduates. I think he's going to be looked upon fondly by IU faithful.
Well, one audience member who probably agrees with you is Yogi's mom, and she often watches the show, so she's agreeing with that.
There you go.
Hey, Doc. Ryan, go ahead.
Mark, I wanted to get your perspective. Obviously,
Yeah.
Ohio State had a tough game today. How are they playing this year? I mean, I know you don't just replace D'Angelo Russell. He's special, and he's showing it over this past week in the NBA. What is going on with them right now? I know they're a younger team. They lost a lot. Like, what's their ceiling? They were undefeated in Big Ten play, but you seem to intimate you don't think they're playing that great. What do you think's going on there?
I mean, if you're not really paying attention, it might seem like Ohio State's terrible and kind of the bottom's falling off of the program and we're in trouble and all this kind of stuff and we're trending the wrong way. I'm actually okay with it. Like today was embarrassment. This is a game that I'm hoping Thad is just ripping these guys for their hustle. I'm fine with losing. I'm fine with even if they would have lost by 60. It was the fact that they weren't trying. They clearly didn't want to be there. That kind of stuff drives you crazy. But they're young. We knew coming in. For me, it was the ceiling for this team was maybe an 8 seed in the NCAA tournament. That was absolutely best case scenario. I mean, I don't think anyone with even the most optimistic Ohio State fan thought that they were going to be any better than that. And probably the floor or the cellar would have been, like a 4 seed in the NIT. And I think right now they're kind of in the middle of that. So it's actually going according to plan, believe it or not. I think they hit a big reset button. Obviously, losing a ton of seniors, losing D'Angelo, but we got a ton of talent. There's a big difference between being bad and being young, and I feel like Ohio State is just young right now. And you guys don't realize it. I mean, maybe you do. Indiana has a great Assembly Hall is awesome. I know you guys appreciate it, but you don't know what it's like to be a road fan in Assembly Hall. You don't know what it's like to have a road team come into Assembly Hall, and that's not an easy environment for freshmen and sophomores to step into. So I'm not really sweating the loss too much. I mean, Indiana's a good team. They're figuring it out. This is a tough environment for young guys. But, yeah, the effort was disappointing. But in the big picture, Ohio State's going to be fine. I think if they can make the tournament, which is looking shaky, I know it seems crazy after today, but they actually are sort of kind of still in the tournament picture. If they can make the tournament, that would be amazing. If they make the tournament, lose by 10 in the first round, I'm ecstatic. This is awesome. So, they're going to be fine next year. They bring everyone back. There's no one-and-done guys on this team, obviously. So I think they'll be fine moving forward. They're just young. They got to figure it out. They don't always play smart. Ton of turnovers, ton of mental problems. And we got to get consistent with effort. But other than that, when they're clicking, they're all right. So I'm not freaking out too much, but I would like to see them actually try. That would be a good start.
Yeah, I mean, I think fans need to realize also that every program goes through that kind of I mean, Indiana did it when they lost those 4,000-point scorers. It's every program has that sort of it's okay as long as we make the tournament this year, we'll be fine. We're back. They're certainly talented. I mean, from what I've seen, they've got a ton of talent. It's just a matter of not having that older sort of leadership. It seems
they have one junior, Mark Loving, no seniors. I think the plan. I mean, I know the plan. I'm still friendly with the coaches, talk to them all the time. The plan is this year, just kind of take your lumps, like games like today. This will happen again. Their next 2 road games, by the way, are at Maryland and at Purdue, so it doesn't get any easier on the road for this team. Take your lumps, kind of learn, learn how the Big Ten works, so to speak. Next year, I think they're shooting for maybe Sweet 16. I think that's the goal. And then the year after that, when these sophomores and freshmen are juniors and seniors, and they're still there, and they're 4 years, three years together, got all that experience. I think at that point we're gonna shoot for something. And that's crazy to say. Basketball, the way it's all set up, the one and done situation. All the basketball fans want results now, but like you said, sometimes when you're not a program like a perennial Kentucky, Kansas, Duke, Carolina, sometimes you do have to hit that reset button, and that's what Ohio State unfortunately is doing this year. So.
Hey, Mark, let me ask you a question. I mean, you obviously spent 4 years playing college basketball. You know, you've been on the inside. Why does a game like this happen from an Ohio State perspective? You know, I mean, you've got, you know, it's a national TV game, and obviously you mentioned the effect of Assembly Hall. But, you know, when you see guys in that first half almost look like they don't want to be there, is there any explanation for it? Like, why does something like that happen?
It's so weird. I don't understand. Like, because this team, they beat Kentucky, obviously. That's the big win. That's what we're all excited about. This team beat Kentucky. How did they do that? And the answer is they did that because everyone told them they're terrible and you're going to get smoked by Kentucky and you're going to lose by 40 and just please keep the game close. And they played with that chip on their shoulder. And it almost feels like they won 7 in a row. They're in first place in the Big Ten. I know it's early. I know they didn't really play too tough a schedule yet. But they're in first place. They won 7 in a row. They beat Kentucky. They're feeling good about themselves. And now all of a sudden they don't have that chip. And I really can't explain it. I don't really understand it. That happened like with teams when I was playing, but it was never this bad. I think that there's just kind of a lack of leadership, and that's understandable when you have a young team like this. There's no guy that can just say we got to do that. And the other thing, I don't think they get like the big picture of losing by 25 is so much worse. Like obviously this is going to sound stupid saying it out loud, but losing by 25 is so much worse than like if they lose by 15 in terms of making the NCAA tournament. Now people are going to think back on this game and, you know, Ohio State's terrible. But if they lose by 15 come March, you look back at their bad losses, maybe this one doesn't look so bad. So there's stuff like that where it would be nice if someone would say, hey, I understand how the NCAA tournament works. I understand how college basketball works. We have to – maybe we're not going to win this game, but we have to at least make this look respectable. We have to make this look like we care and we're a decent team. So I don't understand why this happens, but this does tend to happen. And as hard as it is for fans, you just kind of have to assume we're going to flush this down and move on. Now, if this happens again, you know, next game, we play Rutgers on Wednesday. So if this happens again, there's going to be a serious issue because, you know, losing by 25 to Rutgers would definitely not be good. But these things happen with young teams, and at some point they're going to have to figure it out, but there's no need to panic yet, I don't think.
No, they do, especially with young teams, and we've seen that ourselves as IU fans. So, all right. So quick reminder to everybody. Do want to let you know, as I do at this point, typically during our shows, the Assembly Call is a listener-supported program, and we really appreciate your support. And I had a great moment last night when I checked my email. And the biggest donation that we've ever received, actually, Ryan and Will, I forgot to forward this over to you this morning, but the biggest donation we've ever received came in last night. We really, really appreciate it. It allows us to do all the things we like to do, like keep the chat going and, you know, maintain our email list, all the things that cost money. So we appreciate your support. And if you want to support the Assembly Call, you can go to assemblycall.com/support. There are a number of ways listed there. And again, we greatly appreciate that. And something that those donations will go to is our first annual meetup that we're having, which is coming on January 30th. We will be there for the IU Minnesota game. Ryan's flying in from San Diego. Andy's driving in from Cincinnati. I'll be flying in from Dallas. And we would love to see you there. And so if you go to assemblycall.com/meetup, you can comment on that post, let us know, and we'll be sending details out about when we'll be doing the meetup after the game. So again, that's assemblycall.com/support. If you want to become a patron of the Assembly Call, and assemblycall.com/meetup if you're interested in meeting us on January 30th when we will be there for IU Minnesota.
I want to go ahead and invite Mark to the meetup if he wants to come. It's Bloomington, January 30th. You're not doing anything? Come on, buddy.
All right.
Absolutely.
Drinks are on me.
All right, everybody, you are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. We are breaking down Indiana's 85-60 victory over Ohio State today in Assembly Hall, and we have already gone through the first half of the show, and we have yet to mention OG Anunoby. And so let's go. Let's talk about the freshmen. We're going to talk about the freshmen, and then we have to talk about the one glaring kind of black eye from this game, and so we'll cover that too. But let's talk about the freshmen, Ryan, and let's start with OG, who didn't really contribute much in the box score in the second half, but the sequence that he had in the first half showed just how much potential he has and what we've been seeing since Big Ten play. And that sequence, He had an offensive rebound that he turned into an and one, then an oop from Yogi on the next possession. Then on the next possession, he forced a turnover on defense. This is when Jared Sellinger tweeted, "Let's pack up and go home. These boys quit." And then 2 possessions later, he had a big dunk on an offensive rebound. And that sequence by him really seemed to end all hope that Ohio State had of kind of coming back, getting back into the game. It was like OG single-handedly shut the door. Talk about him. I mean, I think to a certain extent we keep waiting for OG's play to kind of fall off or for him to look like a sub-200 recruit and a guy that we all thought should redshirt at the beginning of the year, but he just keeps coming in and making plays.
No, it's a steady incline for him. He's just steadily improving every game. And I'll tell you what, I like that flashy stuff on offense was great, and I was definitely jumping off my couch screaming and excited. But what I love about he and Morgan is defense. They're always in the right position. I mean, yeah, they're freshmen. They're going to get beat occasionally. That's just what happens. But just defensively, they know what they're doing. They're in the right position. I mean, these are 2 guys who essentially took out Nigel Hayes last game. I mean, who saw that coming a few weeks ago? But both guys just seem to know what they're doing. They're in the right spot. They have the correct energy. They're not too over the top. They running around sort of the Troy Williams thing as we were talking about. They know when to sort of, contain it and sort of focus and direct their energy in positive ways. And I think, OG just continues to be better. And it's funny, you look at the box score and you see he only had 7 points. It seemed like he made such a big impact on the game. But he's a guy who we've talked about these guys throughout the years. Colin Hartman's another one. He doesn't need to score to impact the game. And you want those guys on your team badly because, there's only a finite amount of points to go around. It's about that other stuff, the rebounds, the aggressiveness, the steals, the deflections, correct defensive positioning. You need that guy. You need those guys on your team. So when you combine, Thomas Bryant, who we all knew was going to be great, and then you get a guy like OG Anunoby, who, as I've said before on this, I've talked to several scouts who said nationally, from his sophomore year to his senior year of high school, nobody improved more in the country in that recruiting class. So you've got a guy who's really improving steadily. Juwan Morgan's starting to make an impact after that foot injury. It's really something to be excited about. And I tweeted out, I think this freshman class could be incredibly important in the future of IU basketball because they all play the right way. They all play smart, and they're all about the team game. They're not, guys who just scored 30 points a game in high school and aren't used to playing within a team concept. These guys all fit in. And it's like, putting together a puzzle. You want the pieces that fit. You don't try and jam pieces in that don't fit. And these guys really seem to want to fit with this team.
The other guy who you mentioned, who I thought played really well today, was Colin Hartman, who has obviously been thrust into a starting role with James Blackman Jr. out, but has been struggling a bit. And I thought we saw a lot of those Colin Hartman things today. 8 points, 2 assists, 3 offensive rebounds, a steal. Only had 1 turnover. Was 2 for 4 from downtown. And he was aggressive. A lot of times we see Colin, dribble once or twice and just pick his dribble up, but he dribbled all the way to the basket, made a couple of layups today. I thought it was really nice to see him get going and just to see the entire starting 5 play like starters. Because frankly, the last couple games, you've had Bryant, you've had Yogi, but the other 3 guys have really struggled. And today it was more of OG and Juwan and those guys coming in and keeping it going rather than them coming in and needing a big lift. And so it was nice to see the starters kind of get it going like that. Now, I mentioned kind of the one kind of black eye from this game, and the one thing that stands out as not being good is Nick Zeisloft, who last year was the most efficient player in college basketball in terms of his adjusted offense, or in terms of his O rating on KenPom. Now, obviously, that was for a low-usage player, but that's why he filled such an important role. And started out the season this year pretty well, but he's been in a big shooting slump. And today he went 0 for 7 from downtown. A lot of those threes were wide open. Mark, I want to get your perspective on this. In terms of Zeisloft shooting, are you at all worried about him, or is that, like, to me as a guy, in high school I was a shooter. I look at it as he's going to make one soon and just start going on a big run. Because he today. He looks confident. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, that's the one thing. If there's one thing I could do on a basketball court, and there wasn't, but if there was one thing I could do, it was shooting. So I could speak to like being hot, being cold, that sort of thing a little bit. And I'm not worried at all. I mean, if it was affecting, if you're going to have an 0 for 7 game, this was the game to do it when you're up by 400 and it's over 5 minutes into the game. But yeah, I mean, he's going to hit one. He's going to hit 2 or 3 in a row and then just get back to feeling it. As long as he's shooting the same way every time, as long as it doesn't get in his head that, oh, I'm going to like start, leaving him short, not following through, kind of change my form, that sort of thing. As long as he's just shooting him the same, it's not going to matter. He'll be fine. He'll get back.
Yeah, I think speaking as a guy who was a shooter as well, I think that what's going on with Nick right now, I think he is kind of thinking about it a little bit, and that's the worst thing you can do. I think Mark would probably agree with that. I think it's just you just got to do what you do and not really think, oh, that one was long. Let's see. Because he missed a lot long in a row, and then you saw him last game against Wisconsin. He missed like 3 long on back iron, and then the next one he airballed. So that clearly shows he's thinking about it, And so he just needs to put the headphones on, earmuffs, zone out, and just do what he does. And I think he'll get back to it. As Mark said, if you're going to go 0 for 7, today was the game to do it. And I'm not too worried about him because we know Zaisloff is a guy who could go for 5 for 6 in a game at some point. So I think it's just he's got to, when that kind of stuff isn't falling, you got to work on the rest of your game. And I thought he, a couple times you saw him handling the ball on offense, which never happens. And he calmed guys down a little bit and did things like that. You saw him still engaged on the bench and, kind of pulling guys together. So I think that as long as he's doing that other stuff and the team is winning, it's not a big deal. But the key is he does need to get that because with Blackman out, you're seeing teams not space out defensively as much on Indiana. You're seeing them pack in a little bit more and a little bit more. And, luckily IU's getting better post feeds to Thomas Bryant, so that hasn't affected the team yet. But we need that, the floor spreader to be there. And I think that Zaisloff can be that guy when he comes off the bench to keep the defense expanded, keep those passing lanes open. So hopefully he bounces back. But, and I think it's going to happen too. I think we all agree. Eventually he's going to hit, 2 or 3 in a row and he's going to be fine. But for now, yeah, it is something to keep an eye on, and he's definitely a guy you don't want falling into the tank.
Yeah, I want to talk about Thomas Bryant in a second, but Will, you've been throwing a few numbers here in this chat. Let's get to these, because especially the new KenPom defensive rating, that's a number that'll get IU fans excited.
Yes, it will. We are now 73rd in the country in defensive efficiency, and I don't want to give Ryan any bigger of a head that he already has, but I think it's kind of happened after that infamous rant when he told him just to do something different, use French, use Billboard, something, but I think it's been since that date they've been steadily improving and that number's been going up. And then on top of that, the 30-point halftime lead was the largest in Big Ten play for IU since putting up 27 on Northwestern back in 2015, so 16 years ago now. So it's been a long time, and that was a fun half of basketball to watch.
That was a heck of a first half of basketball.
Wait, the year 2000 was 16 years ago? What the hell happened?
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
Oh my God, I feel old.
Yeah, I know. Hey, Mark, let me ask you about Thomas Bryant, who had, probably his overall best game today. I mean, 18 points, 13 boards. He's really improved as a rebounder, and he's so efficient. In fact, today he was 7-11 from the field, and his 2-point percentage is going to go down. That's how well he's been shooting. When you look at a guy like Bryant, who's just a freshman, thoughts on him and how big he can be now, as we get into the heart of Big Ten play.
He is like the perfect big man recruit for IU in that he's a McDonald's All-American, obviously super talented on down the line, but he's just unpolished just enough to where he's going to come back next year. You assume. You don't know with these guys, but you assume he's going to come back next year. You assume he's probably going to be at least a 3-year guy, which is pretty awesome. But I think, he obviously, it took him a little while to adjust as far as mentally, you go back to the Maui situation and he's sometimes wears his emotion on his sleeve. But for me, he's settling into his role on this team. He realizes that this is what is needed from him. I think last year, the big question mark for IU is, an interior player. And coming into this year, the question was if Thomas Bryant can step up, be consistent, have games like he had today, and you surround him with the talent, and everyone kind of chips in like we know they can, there's no telling how good IU can be. So if we get Blackman back, which I don't think is going to happen right this year, it's not going to happen, but if they can adjust to at least Blackman being gone, if they can adjust to this defensive style that they seem to be playing, and they have Bryant. They're certainly more balanced. They might not be as fun to watch offensively, where they're shooting 400 threes a game and running up and down the court and giving up a layup so they can come back and shoot a three. It might not be as fun, but it's definitely more effective, and it's definitely harder to guard. So for him to have a game like today, which, by the way, he did it against big guys for Ohio State who Thad Matta tells them every game, like, all I want you to do is rebound and play defense. Like, those are the only two things those guys are out there to do. It's not like he's doing this against, offensive-minded big guys. So these big guys on Ohio State were trying to out-rebound, or they weren't really trying to do much of anything today, but that's typically what their role is. They're trying to play defense and they're trying to rebound, and Bryant still ate their lunch. So it was pretty fun to watch. The Indiana fan of me had a fun time watching him kind of have a breakout game today.
And it's interesting what you said about him, kind of being the perfect guy and expecting him back next year. Because I was having a conversation on Twitter with someone about this earlier today, who just assumes that Bryant is gone. And look, as Bryant continues to put up 18 points and 13 boards, maybe that happens. But you look at Draft Express, and they have him projected as a, kind of a middle second-round pick in the 2017 draft. And I think that does, at least to people I've talked to and read, that does seem to be the consensus, that he's a 2-year guy. Now, if you listen to the show in 2014, you know that we were saying Noah Vonleh was a 2-year guy, and he ended up going. But, I think there were different circumstances that may have led to that. So it'll be interesting because, I think we all saw the potential from Thomas early in the season. And then, kind of struggled, was up and down, and would disappear for parts of games. But he's been so consistent. And Indiana's doing such a better job of getting him the ball. And, what is it, Mark? I mean, in terms of a team's ability to get the ball inside to a big guy, because we're seeing a guy like Robert Johnson has been so good at doing it, and seems more so than maybe any other Hoosier really wants to get the ball to Thomas and looks inside to him first. But we know that's been a big criticism of Indiana, going all the way back to Cody Zeller and even Noah Vonleh. But Indiana now really seems to be doing a better job of getting the ball into Thomas. What does that take offensively, to get the ball into a big guy like Bryant?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely takes understanding of what you're trying to accomplish. So I don't know if this is the coaching staff kind of putting an emphasis on feeding the ball down low more, or if it's the guys kind of reading the situations better, not taking as many contested shots. But it definitely does take practice. Post feeding is so much harder than it should be at the college level. I don't know what it is about it, but for some reason, when I was at Ohio State, I dreaded post feeding drills so much. I don't know why. Every time I would think I threw a good pass, it would, the guy would fight over the top, and I would get it stolen and stuff. So it's something that does take the desire to want to feed the post, to say I'm going to try to find a way to get it to my big guy, and two, it takes a little bit of skill to know where to put the ball to kind of lead him in the right spots and stuff like that. So I don't know if this is a decision by the players, the coaches, both. But, last year or 2 years ago with Vonleh and Unzo, like you said, that was kind of my big criticism of watching IU basketball is you got these obviously super talented big guys who are just, so much better than the guys guarding them, and they're just not getting the touches that they need. And it's encouraging to see Thomas Bryant, fighting for the ball. Sometimes that's the case. Sometimes the big guy doesn't really know when he should be fighting. He'll start posting up, but the ball's at the top of the key. You can't feed the post from the top of the key, so all your effort is worthless. So he knows when to start trying to get position on his guys. Stuff like that goes a long way. So it's really encouraging to see IU pounding the ball inside stuff and getting that done. But I think their identity is always going to be three-point shooting. I think they got to get that. That's always going to be kind of what wins them games in those tight games is the guard play. But to have a consistent big guy to dump the ball down to when maybe you're going cold is certainly a good thing.
One more question for you, Mark. Obviously we hyper-focus on each game on this show. That's, kind of what we do. What are your thoughts overall on just kind of the big picture of IU basketball right now, the job Tom Crean is doing? I mean, obviously the sky seemed to be falling after the Duke loss, and now Indiana's on this winning streak, 4-0. But we saw a good start to Big Ten play last year and a similar win over Maryland around the similar time of year, and we know how that ended. So we don't want to get too high, but it is nice to see where the team is right now. What's kind of your take on where the program is and this team specifically?
So it's all about consistency. I mean, it's right now they're establishing some consistency. For me, I watch one IU game, I get excited. This is the best team. I had IU in my little mock rankings that I was doing with people, where I would, keep an eye on all the national teams and kind of rank them. I thought IU was the 6th best team going into Maui. That's how good I thought this team was. I thought they were unstoppable offensively. I thought if they, just put forth 10% effort defensively, they would just their offensive talent would carry them. And then obviously they kind of crashed out, and the question becomes, can they be consistent? Can they give a consistent effort? And right now they're doing that. And I think as long as they do that, there is no telling how good they can be. They certainly have an easy Big Ten schedule. I'm not making excuses for, being an Ohio State guy and saying, IU got some favoritism or anything like that, and I'm not going to discredit their 4-0 start. But if you look at their Big Ten schedule, it is probably the easiest in the conference. That is a good thing in my eyes, obviously. I don't think they really care so much to be battle-tested going into March. Forget all that. Just, get the easiest schedule and win the Big Ten. I like that. I like that they have an easy schedule. I like that how they're playing consistently right now. I'm very optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic, I should say. I get excited. I ebb and flow with this IU team the last few years. But the direction they're headed right now is certainly a good one. I just want to see this 9 in or 9 out. Just the consistency. Maybe they're not hitting shots. Maybe Zeislov is 0 for 7. That's okay. As long as they're giving their effort, as long as they're making a commitment to the defensive end, then there's reason to be hopeful as an Indiana fan.
And how do you balance, growing up as an IU? I'm sure you get this question all the time. How do you balance growing up an IU fan, but then you went to Ohio State? Like that's obviously an interesting,
It's really weird. This is like my least favorite day of the year was when Ohio State plays IU because I hated IU today. Like because everyone asked me like, who are you cheering for today? It's like, come on, I'm cheering for my alma mater. Of course I'm not cheering for IU. So then now you're asking me all these questions about IU guys. I'm like, I wasn't watching that. I was too busy crying that my team wasn't trying. So it's always Ohio State #1 for me, but you know how it is. Tons of IU fans go to other schools. You go to Indiana State or something, you're still cheer for the Hoosiers. So I always will watch IU. I always cheer for them. But when Ohio State plays IU is dead to me. I hope they get blown out. That certainly did not happen today. My brother is actually downstairs right now. We were watching the game in my basement, and he's just like laughing at me and trying to like build me back up. He's like, "Well, Ohio State's young." I'm like, "Shut up! I don't want to hear that." Right? He's just trying to build me back up, but. He graduated from IU, so he's an IU guy and all that kind of stuff, and it makes for interesting arguments with my friends and family. But I'm an Ohio State guy. I'll take my loss today, but I'm encouraged moving forward that Indiana's playing well. That'll be fun to watch. So.
Hey, and what's next for you, by the way? Because I've missed reading your columns, obviously. Grantland is no longer, which stinks. We all hate that is a reality. But what's next for you? And where are you writing about college basketball right now?
I am not. I have.
Would you like to write for the Assembly Call? Because it's open to you anytime you want to.
I can't really talk about my situation too much, which if you understand how contracts and legalities work, you would maybe get a decent idea of why. But I'm not really doing anything right now. I'm sort of kind of working on another book. Can't really talk about that too much, which is always fun. I'm always the guy who, when I hear like people talk about these things on interviews, like you hear celebrities say, like, I'm working on this project, but I can't really get into it. I'm like, why not? Tell us about it. And then now I'm in that situation where I can't really talk much about it, but I'm because ESPN made some ESPN decisions. I'm just kind of sitting on the sidelines and watching college basketball, which is something I did for 4 years, so I'm pretty good at this. I got a good practice to this.
Well, as soon as you figure out what you're doing or can talk about it, let us know. We'll promote it.
Will do.
I mean, we're all big fans. I know we talked about when Jared reached out to you and found out that you were coming on. We were all just like, oh, awesome, So definitely keep us involved and keep us plugged in.
Well, yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. It was a good time. I wish it would have been a better game. We could have had more fun talking about how great Ohio State is and how excited I am for the future. But I don't know. It is really cool because IU has been frustrating. I mean, if anyone follows me on Twitter, follows what I write, I'm very critical of Tom Crean. I get really frustrated watching IU, some of the decisions the coaching staff makes, the players not really giving their effort. Just on down the line, it's really frustrating. But honestly, I throw so much cynicism out into the world that days like today, if I can turn off the Ohio State part of me and just focus on the Indiana part, like this was awesome. It was so cool to see the team just keep it going. Feed off the crowd. The crowd was awesome today. The team was from the start. Like they started playing well. It it fed it, the defense bled into the offense, which bled into the next possession, and they had that feeling like we're up 30. Can we get up 60? Can we win by 80? Like they looked like they never want to take their foot off the gas. So it's going to be exciting to see where they go from here. But hopefully they run into a brick wall in Ohio State in the Big Ten tournament, and we get our payback. But it'll be fun moving forward to watch IU for sure.
Yeah, because this is the only time these two teams play in the regular season. There is no return trip to Ohio State. So,
and like I said, IU won one half, Ohio State won one half, so we're gonna have to get the grudge half at some point, right? And that how this works, I don't know. This is my first year following basketball. I don't really know how it works. I was under the impression. So.
Right. So this is the point in the show typically where Andy previews Indiana's next opponent, and that next opponent is Minnesota. The game is at the Barn, so even though Minnesota is ranked 185th and not looking good, all of us will be terrified about that game because it's at the Barn, and we've seen just the horror stories that have happened there. Mark, do you have any insight on Minnesota, what's facing Indiana up there?
I can tell you this. When I was a senior, we played at Minnesota, and one of the guys in the student section told me I had a muffin top. And I still think about that like once a week, and it just eats at my soul. So I'm not really sure how that's going to affect Indiana's game, but if they could, dish out some personal insults like that and get in there inside IU's head, they could be for a war. But no, seriously, the barn is wild. Like the barn, if you've never been to the barn, it's not a place that I'd say you should kind of plan a vacation around because it's not like that cool. But it definitely has like a Hinkle feel to it. It's definitely one of my favorite arenas, and because of that, anyone who's like been to a game at Hinkle knows that there's just dead spots every so often, or every just random places on the court. There's dead spots. The lighting is weird. Like some light comes in from weird angles, at the right times. It's such a weird place, man. So the barn, if you're like have an excuse to go to Minnesota, you should definitely at some point in your life go to a game in the barn. But I don't know. It is a house of horrors sometimes, so it'll be interesting. But Minnesota's not very good, so you should be fine.
No, they're not. And we'll do our picks. We'll do our last call here in just a second. One final reminder, make sure you get on the email list, assemblycall.com/subscribe, or text Indiana, INDIANA, to 44144. Even though Andy wasn't here on the show today, he will be doing his analysis for the email. You'll get Will's stat of the day. You'll get my analysis on it. And it'll definitely be one of the most fun emails that we've written and sent, considering how great this win was for Indiana. So assemblycall.com/subscribe and text Indiana to 44144. All right, well, we are wrapping up here on the Assembly Call IU postgame show. We've been joined by Mark Titus, formerly a writer for Grantland, who played at Ohio State but grew up an Indiana fan. He's been giving us some excellent insight, breaking down Indiana's 85-60 win over Ohio State. And so let's go around the horn real quick and go on record with our picks. Mark, you're welcome to join in with our pick. In fact, you're welcome to pick Minnesota for Andy if you want to, and that'll just be his pick. What are your thoughts on IU Minnesota? The Hoosiers going to get this victory?
They are going to get the victory. I'll say it'll be pretty high scoring. I'll say 81-65. I think it's going to be 65. They're not going to win that big. I'll say 81-70. 81-70 is my pick. Yeah.
All right, Ryan.
I like Mark believe that it's going to be a high scoring game. I will pick Indiana. I'm going to say like 75-68, something like that, because Indiana's going to be going in the second half at that basket that everybody says is only like 9'6". So who knows how that's going to turn out. I mean, there's no way that court is regulation, but yeah. So I think it's going to be probably about under 10 point, maybe about 10-point win for Indiana, and I think there will be some nervous moments at the Phillips household about that. So because every time they go to the barn, I want to bury my head somewhere because I just know it's not going to end well.
Will, your pick.
I'm going to go IU in their 10th straight victory.
Hey, what the hell happened? Did Seattle end up winning while we were doing the show?
I think Minnesota missed a field goal at the end.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, so I should go on record as saying I'm a Vikings fan.
Oh, man.
So if anyone's watching this, I got my Purple People Eater shirt on. That's what that's about. This has not been a fun sports day for me. We'll say that. I turned on as we were kind of talking, I saw that the score. I saw the Vikings were lining up for the game winner. I turned it on, and yeah, so hopefully tomorrow's better. We'll see that.
Okay, and then my pick, well, here's the thing. You know that I'm terrified about the barn. I've talked about it a lot over the past 5 years, but here's how Maryland has fared at the barn their last or how Minnesota's fared at the barn their last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 home games. They had one win over 335th ranked Chicago State, 70-52. Against 215th ranked South Dakota, lost by 4. Against South Dakota State, number 83, lost by 14. These are all home games. Against Milwaukee, number 129, lost by 9. Against Michigan State, lost by 8. Against Northwestern, lost by 25. I say the Hoosiers go into the barn, get about a 10-point victory. I don't think I could ever predict us to win more than that there, but I do feel much more comfortable, especially after how IU played at Nebraska, how they toughed out a win over Wisconsin, and then came out today and kind of showed us a higher ceiling perhaps than we thought they had in that first half against Ohio State. I'm feeling much better heading into this game against Minnesota. All right, it's time to wrap up our last call where we give our final thoughts, and Ryan, we'll go over to you first.
I just think it was IU's most complete performance of the season, easily. Maybe the most complete performance in 2 seasons, or even 3. I just think that everything, defense, rebounding, scoring. We've seen this team just blow the doors off teams offensively and have an okay game defensively and rebounding and all that. I just thought in those 3 phases they were outstanding today, and I thought that they took advantage of an Ohio State team that was down. I mean, if you let a team that's struggling hang around all day, they can pull out a win on you. And I thought that they sensed blood in the water and went after it hard. And I thought played a great game. And I think that, again, as you said, that showed a higher ceiling than I think we thought was there. And when you look at the trend of the last few games, especially defensively, you're really starting to see positive momentum for IU. Really starting to figure it out on the defensive end, which is the most important part of this season for them. We know they can score. Even with Blackman out, other guys can fill that role. It's about the defense, and they can't go anywhere if they don't play defense, and we're starting to see them play much better defense.
Will, last call.
Yeah, that was one heck of a game to watch. Really fun to watch. Actually, Yogi kind of echoes those statements at postgame. He said that was the most fun basketball that he's ever played since he's been here, which is good to hear. Then echoing what Ryan said about the defense, it's good to see the defense steadily improve, and it's kind of showing up more and more each game. And then I'm going to finish with a stat that I didn't get to today. Indiana outscored Ohio State 32-5 on second chance points. So if that doesn't put the game into perspective, I don't know what else does.
It certainly does. Mark Titus, last call.
Yeah, I would say I think what IU needs to do right now is enjoy this win, but then tomorrow not pat themselves on the back. I think it would be helpful to realize that Ohio State kind of threw in the towel early, and instead of saying we're great, we're here, we're back, we figured it out, I think they're at their best, Indiana I'm talking about, when they do have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. They are playing as though everyone's given up on them, that sort of thing. So otherwise, it was obviously a great win today for them. It was fun to watch if you're an IU fan. Defensively has always been the question mark for IU going back to a couple years. So for them to play so well defensively, for them to win so emphatically is great. I'm slightly worried that maybe they think they're great now and they're going to get sort of overconfident moving forward. But maybe that's just the pessimism of me coming out that always seems to come out when I talk about IU basketball. But otherwise, it was a great win. And the Ohio State fan in me would say, all you IU fans, please don't think we're this bad. We're actually not. You're gonna when Ohio State ends up upsetting someone later in the year, you're gonna think, how in the hell did they do that? They're terrible. We're not really that bad. Don't let this game think. We're certainly not a good team, obviously, but don't let this game, shape your entire opinion of the Buckeyes. So otherwise, it was a lot of fun coming on today. So thanks for having me.
By the way, we forgot to mention the stat of the game. Tim Priller was a 1 trillion today.
1 trillion. I thought for a while that Ohio State's entire team was trying to put up 1 trillion, which that's probably, in retrospect, that's what they should have just tried to do. I would have been pretty awesome if the entire team just put up 1 trillion. So, yeah, Tim Priller, he's doing well. He's making me proud.
And for anybody who doesn't know what 1 trillion is, it's when you get in the box score, you play, you've got that 1 or 2 in the minutes, and then zeros all the way across. So.
Right.
We've seen a few from Priller this year, but it's always a good sign for Indiana when Priller gets in the game. So, and it was today. And my final comment is, look, this win feels a lot like the Maryland win felt last year. And in the Maryland game last year, it was a big second half. Today, it was a big first half. And you can't be anything but encouraged by what Indiana did today. When you think back to how they played in Maui, when you think back to the Duke game, hell, even think back to the Kennesaw State game or the Rutgers game, and look at how far it seems that this team has come. And I think it would be easy to look at this year's start, 4-0, and this big win at home, similar to last year's, where Indiana starts 5-1 in the conference, have the big win at home against Maryland, and to expect the same, kind of February swoon that we've seen, and to be pessimistic in those terms. And I think that fear is out there. But here's what gives me some hope and has me feeling more positive about this, is that the way Indiana's winning these games is different. Last year, at the start of Big Ten play, it was with offense. But this year, we're seeing a new defensive mindset. As Will said, Yogi mentioned, how this team had a different defensive mentality. We've seen Thomas Bryant, OG Anunoby, and Juwan Morgan all be guys who are focused on playing hard. They play good fundamental defense. That has had an impact. And it seems like even the upperclassmen are almost following their lead in some senses in playing defense. And we know that the loss of Blackman will hurt offensively, but it does seem to have helped defensively. And so I think that's what has me and what has a lot of Indiana fans feeling strangely optimistic after this win, which we didn't think we'd feel 3 or 4 weeks ago. But the Hoosiers are doing it a little bit differently. And with this new defensive intensity and focus and so many, we're just not seeing as much of the just drive right down the lane, the wide open facepalm defensive possessions. They're being replaced by shot clock violations and good solid defensive possessions. That's different for this Indiana team. And this is a formula, what we've seen these past few games, with which Indiana can compete in the Big Ten. And so we'll see if it continues. This is just one game. That game against Minnesota is the next one. And we've said all along, this team needed to take these first 7 games in Big Ten play, win at least 6 of them, put some wins in the bank before the schedule gets tougher. I don't think any of us expected that we could at the same time forge a new identity as a team that also plays defense too. But so far Indiana is. If they continue, the talent is still there to compete for a Big Ten title, to get a good seed in the NCAA tournament and make a run into the second weekend. I don't think we would have thought that a few weeks ago. But I think we can reasonably think that now, given what we've seen. But it's up to the team to, as Mark said, don't get overconfident, don't think you've arrived, to keep the same gritty attitude, tough attitude we've had these last few games. And if we do that, then we should be able to keep winning games as we have these past couple. We'll see. But I know I'm feeling a lot better now than I was a few weeks ago, and that's a good place to be in. All right, everybody, thank you very much for watching this episode of the Assembly Call, or listening on the podcast, or listening on the Sports Buzz in Louisville. We appreciate everybody who is part of the audience. We're glad you're here. And Mark Titus, thank you for joining us. And we will talk to you all next week. We got a long layoff. When's the Minnesota game? Is it Saturday? I believe it's Saturday, right? I think it's Saturday.
Yeah, it's Saturday.
16th, yeah, Saturday the 16th. So we got a layoff. We won't talk to you all week. But then we'll talk to you Saturday after IU Minnesota. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you then, everybody.